What really happened to the stars of Storage Wars? The ones we laughed with, rooted for, and watched strike gold, or go home empty-handed? Over the years, some familiar faces have vanished from the screen, leading fans to wonder, did something tragic happen? Were there fallouts behind the scenes? Or did they simply walk away from the spotlight? Well, the truth isn't as grim as the rumors suggest, but it's just as surprising. Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss wasn't just a cast member on Storage Wars. He was the heart and soul of the show. From the moment he rolled up to his first auction in one of his vintage cars, wearing those signature gloves and flashing that mischievous grin, viewers knew they were watching someone special. Barry was never the loudest bidder or the most aggressive competitor. Instead, he brought something the show desperately needed: pure, genuine joy. While other cast members focused on profit margins and business strategies, Barry treated every storage locker like a treasure chest, waiting to reveal its secrets. He didn't just see dollar signs when he opened a unit. He saw stories, history, and adventure. When he found an old jukebox, he'd spend more time talking about the music it once played than calculating its resale value. When he discovered vintage collectibles, his eyes would light up like a kid on Christmas morning. Barry understood that the real treasure wasn't always what you could sell. Sometimes it was the excitement of not knowing what you'd find next. His approach to the show was refreshingly different. Barry had already made his fortune in the produce business long before Storage Wars came along. The auctions weren't about survival for him, they were about having fun. This freedom allowed him to take risks others wouldn't dare, bid on units that seemed worthless, and walk away from sure things just because they didn't spark his curiosity. Viewers loved this about him, because it reminded them why they fell in love with the show in the first place: the thrill of discovery. Barry's personality made even the most mundane finds entertaining. He could turn a box of old books into a fascinating discussion about forgotten authors, or transform a dusty piece of furniture into a lesson about craftsmanship from decades past. His knowledge wasn't just surface level either. Barry genuinely understood antiques, collectibles, and the stories behind them. He respected the items he found, treating each discovery with the care it deserved. But after just 4 seasons, Barry quietly stepped away from the show. There wasn't any dramatic exit or heated argument with producers. He simply decided it was time to close that chapter of his life, like someone finishing a favorite book and placing it gently back on the shelf. Fans were disappointed, but most understood. Barry had never seemed like someone who needed the spotlight. He was just someone who enjoyed sharing his adventures with others. For years after leaving Storage Wars, Barry kept a relatively low profile. He returned to his other passions, collecting classic cars, hunting for antiques, and enjoying the kind of adventures that didn't require cameras or television crews. Occasionally, he'd pop up in interviews or make guest appearances, always with that same warm smile and infectious enthusiasm that made him famous. Life seemed good for Barry Weiss until everything changed in 2019. While riding his beloved motorcycle through the streets of Los Angeles, Barry was involved in a devastating crash. The accident was severe, leaving him with serious chest and leg injuries, multiple broken bones, and significant internal damage. The man who had always seemed invincible, who could walk into any storage unit with confidence, was suddenly fighting for his life in a hospital bed. The recovery process was long and difficult. Barry underwent several surgeries and faced months of rehabilitation. The same hands that once carefully examined vintage treasures now had to relearn basic movements. The legs that carried him through countless auctions had to remember how to walk without pain. For someone who had lived such an active, adventurous life, the forced stillness must have been incredibly challenging. But Barry's spirit, the same one that made him beloved by Storage Wars fans, carried him through. He approached his recovery with the same patience and curiosity he once brought to storage lockers. Instead of rushing the process or getting frustrated with setbacks, he treated healing like another adventure, taking it one day at a time. When Barry eventually began making public appearances again, fans were thrilled to see him. His humor was still intact, his smile still warm. But there was something different about his pace. He moved a little more carefully, spoke a little more thoughtfully. The accident had changed him, but it hadn't broken his spirit. Dave Hester. If Storage Wars was a poker table, Dave Hester was the guy who slammed his chips down with a grin just to rattle everyone else. From the very first episode, he was the man you loved to hate. Loud, confident, and never afraid to outbid someone by a single dollar, Dave thrived on competition. His infamous "yoop" became both his signature and a source of annoyance for the other bidders. He wanted the best locker, the highest profit, and the last word. But in 2018, Dave's story took a sharp turn. Late one night, he suffered a stroke that left him struggling with speech and coordination. Instead of standing in front of a storage unit, he was lying in a hospital bed, facing weeks of rehab. For a man who thrived on control, it was a humbling moment. Dave disappeared from the show for a while. The man who once fought tooth and nail over dusty boxes now had a different battle, his own health. Slowly, he rebuilt his strength and returned to the auction world, though Storage Wars was no longer his main stage. Fans noticed the change. He seemed calmer, less interested in constant battles, and more focused on enjoying life. Even if people didn't miss his antics, they respected the man who fought his way back from a life-threatening moment. It was proof that even the loudest voice sometimes needs to go quiet before it can be heard again. Ivy Calvin. Ivy Calvin didn't stroll into Storage Wars, he marched in like he owned the place. A former arena football player and mixed martial artist, Ivy had the kind of confidence that made people step aside when he walked in. Dubbed the King of Palmdale, he could sniff out a valuable locker in seconds. For Ivy, the storage game wasn't just about making money, it was about running a tight ship. He took pride in his resale store, Grandma's Attic, where every piece had a place. He was the kind of buyer who could spot a hidden gem under a pile of dusty blankets and still have time to joke with his competitors. But over time, fans noticed something: he was showing up less. His booming laugh and competitive edge weren't gone, but they were rarer. Away from the cameras, Ivy was focusing on his health and spending more time with his family. In later appearances, his sons often joined him, turning the auctions into family outings rather than high-pressure battles. By stepping back without fanfare, Ivy proved that sometimes the biggest victories happen away from the public eye. Darrell Sheets. If Barry Weiss was the cool uncle, Darrell Sheets was the wild older cousin who would bet his last dollar just for the thrill of winning. Nicknamed the Gambler, Darrell lived up to his name, always chasing the big score. He didn't mind throwing serious money at a locker if he thought it might hide something spectacular. His son Brandon often appeared alongside him, learning how to take calculated risks and occasionally learning why he shouldn't. For Darrell, this was about more than business. It was about leaving a legacy his son could be proud of. But in early 2019, everything changed. After a normal day, Darrell felt sudden chest pain. He ignored it at first, but it got worse, and soon he was in the middle of a massive heart attack. It wasn't just a health scare, it was a life-or-death moment. The man who thrived on adrenaline had to slow down, not by choice, but by necessity. His absence left a noticeable gap on the show. Fans missed his big wins, his bigger losses, and his fearless attitude. Brandy Passanti and Darrell Sheets. They were like the couple next door, who somehow got invited to every party because they were just that entertaining to watch. From their very first episode, viewers could tell they were total opposites. Brandy with her cool, level-headed approach, and Darrell with his "let's just wing it" energy. She'd stand there, scanning a storage locker with laser focus, trying to figure out if the pile of boxes was worth the gamble. He'd already be itching to place a bid just for the thrill of it. That push and pull was what made them fun. You could practically see Brandy rolling her eyes as Darrell went after something questionable, and you could see Darrell's grin when she turned out to be right. They had a way of balancing each other. He brought excitement. She brought caution. Together, they made decisions that sometimes worked out perfectly, and other times, not so much. On the show, they ran their own thrift store now and then, turning their finds into cash. But behind the laughter and bickering, things were changing. Away from the cameras, their relationship was going through rough waters. By 2020, the news quietly slipped out. They had broken up. There was no dramatic on-screen blowout, no public war of words. It just happened. Later, Brandy hinted that the relationship had been far from easy. She didn't give all the details, but the little she shared made it clear it had been complicated and painful. After the split, Brandy shifted her focus to her children and away from the demanding filming schedule. Darrell, for his part, also faded from the spotlight. Without their back-and-forth banter, the show felt different. Fans missed them, not just as individuals, but as a duo. They were proof that not all treasure hunts are about antiques and collectibles. Sometimes the real value is in the chemistry between two people, even if it doesn't last forever. Renee and Casey Nizoda. When Renee and Casey joined Storage Wars, they brought a totally different energy. Renee's booming voice could cut through any crowd, and he had a sharp eye for valuable items. Casey, meanwhile, balanced him out with a warm personality and careful attention to detail. You could tell they weren't just playing at being partners, they genuinely worked well together, both in the storage business and in life. Renee was no stranger to the resale world. He had grown up surrounded by it, with years of experience, hunting for treasures and turning them into profit. Casey wasn't just along for the ride. She had her own skills, from spotting quality items to managing the business side of things. Together, they made a powerhouse team. They also weren't afraid to have a little fun. On screen, their interactions had a playful tone, but it was always clear that they respected each other's instincts. When they won big, they celebrated together. When a locker turned out to be a dud, they shrugged it off and moved on. But life has a way of shifting focus. In 2023, Renee's father passed away after a short battle with lung cancer. It was a difficult time, and fans could hear the emotion in Renee's voice when he spoke about it. He expressed deep gratitude for the support he received from viewers and friends. The loss seemed to add a new layer to the couple's journey, less about chasing the next big win, and more about building something lasting. Dan and Laura Dotson. For many fans, Storage Wars wouldn't feel the same without the rhythmic chant of Dan Dotson or the bright smile of his wife, Laura. They weren't there to bid. They were there to keep the auctions alive, and they did it with style. Dan had been auctioneering long before the show came along. His rapid-fire delivery could make even a stack of old boxes sound exciting. Laura was right beside him, keeping the energy high and the atmosphere friendly. Together, they kept the pace moving, no matter how tense the bidding got. But in 2014, their world came dangerously close to falling apart. One morning, Dan woke up feeling off. His vision was blurry, and within minutes, he collapsed. Laura didn't hesitate. She got him to the hospital immediately. Doctors soon discovered the cause, a brain aneurysm. The situation was critical. Without emergency surgery, Dan might not have survived. The operation was risky, and the recovery even harder. He spent months regaining his strength, supported every step of the way by Laura. Fans were relieved when he finally returned to the auction block, even if he moved a little slower than before. The scare changed things for them. They still loved the auction world, but they also understood how quickly everything can shift. That knowledge seemed to make their smiles a little warmer, their laughs a little louder. Mary Padian. Mary Padian wasn't like the other bidders. While many competitors stepped up to the storage lockers with a sharp calculator in their heads, figuring out profit margins and resale value, Mary seemed to approach each auction like a little adventure. To her, a dusty box wasn't just a dusty box. It might be a forgotten piece of history or a diamond in the rough waiting for a second life. She first appeared on the Texas spin-off Storage Wars, Texas, where her creativity quickly set her apart. Mary had a background in journalism and design, having worked as an assistant to the editor of Architectural Digest. That experience gave her an eye for unique pieces and the imagination to see what they could become. On the show, she was often found digging through a locker and pulling out something most people would walk past, like an old trunk or a worn-down chair, and instantly envisioning how to restore it into something beautiful. Her style was upbeat, quirky, and full of warmth. While others sometimes clashed over bids, Mary's approach was friendlier, more collaborative. She built strong connections with other cast members, sometimes teaming up to tackle a locker together. Viewers loved watching her get genuinely excited about a find, no matter how small, because her enthusiasm was contagious. When she transitioned from the Texas version to the original California-based Storage Wars, Mary brought that same charm with her. She didn't just buy and sell, she repurposed, reimagined, and transformed her finds into custom pieces that blended artistry with practicality. Fans nicknamed her the Junkster for her knack of turning so-called junk into treasures. But over time, Mary began appearing less and less. She shifted her focus to running her online store, where she could sell her restored items to customers who shared her love for creative upcycling. She also started taking on more personal projects, traveling, and exploring new opportunities outside the constant filming schedule. Though she's no longer a regular on the show, Mary's spirit still resonates with fans. She proved that Storage Wars wasn't just about profit. It could also be about passion, imagination, and finding beauty in the most unexpected places. Emily Wares. Emily Wares might have joined Storage Wars later than most, but she arrived with serious credentials. By the time she appeared in Season 10, she was already an award-winning auctioneer, having started her career at just 17 years old in Iowa. She trained under her father, who was also in the auction business, and quickly developed a reputation for her lightning-fast chant and confident stage presence. Her entry into the show brought something new. She wasn't a bidder. She was there to run the auctions with precision and professionalism. Emily's style was crisp and polished, and her speed on the mic impressed even the seasoned cast members. At just 27, she was one of the youngest professional auctioneers to ever appear on the series, breaking stereotypes in a field often dominated by older men. Outside of Storage Wars, Emily had competed in and won several auctioneering competitions, which made her a standout in the industry. On the show, she kept the pace lively, but wasn't afraid to have fun with the bidders, often matching their banter with a quick comeback of her own. Fans appreciated her mix of skill and personality, and she quickly developed a following. Her run on Storage Wars lasted only a season or two, but Emily's departure wasn't due to any controversy. Instead, she decided to focus on her personal life. She married her longtime partner, started a family, and even pursued another passion, singing. She began performing at local events and sharing her music online, showing that her talents extended far beyond the auction block. Kenny Crossley. Kenny Crossley was the kind of guy you couldn't help but notice, even in a crowded auction. With his easygoing charm, deep southern drawl, and quick wit, he could turn even a disappointing locker into a moment worth laughing about. Kenny wasn't just there to buy storage units, he was there to have a good time, make friends, and enjoy the ride. Originally from New Orleans, Kenny had a colorful background before joining the Storage Wars cast. He had worked in law enforcement, run his own business, and even dabbled in various odd jobs, all of which seemed to give him a treasure chest